Welcome everyone to the Wednesday edition of our Packers News live chat alongside Ryan Wood. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers hit the field today, gearing up for their final game of the regular season against the Chicago Bears. A lot on the line. We have a lot to discuss today, including the Packers' big waiver claim. We'll get to that. Plus, we'll also take a look at today's practice and look ahead to this weekend's game against the Chicago Bears in just a moment. Before we get into that, as always, you know the drill. We want you to be a part of the conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question, leave us a comment down in the chat. Ryan and I want to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. The Packers are clearly hungry for some snacks. They claimed Snacks Harrison off of waivers. He was released by the Seattle Seahawks just a few days ago, as they no longer needed him. He was inactive against the Los Angeles Rams last week, and he said, "I want to be released. I want to go to a team that needs me." He played 6 games for the Seahawks, only had about 9 sacks and a forced fumble. What role can he play in this Packers defense?
Well, first and foremost, seeing snacks inundated on my timeline is not what I need for my diet. It's made me very hungry tonight. So just let's get that out of the way. Secondly, what role? Well, he's not a game changer. It's not like he's going to come in and be the savior of the run defense. And before I see a lot of questions already. No, he will not be available this week because of COVID-19 protocols. This is a playoff signing. This is Brian Gutekunst saying, looking on every single rock and saying, where can we get better going into the playoffs? This is a 1 seed. This is a team with legitimate Super Bowl aspirations. It's also a team that a year ago had its season end on the doorstep of the Super Bowl because it gave up 300 rushing yards in the NFC Championship game. So as well as the defense and the defensive line has played better lately, they could use some veteran depth on the interior, and that's what Snacks Harrison gives them. He's not a game changer. He's 32 years old now, 9th NFL season. He's not the 2016 All-Pro that he was 5 years ago. But if you can get a little bit better, you make that move, and that's what Brian Gutekunst believes that he's doing in this signing. So, there's no question that it's a worthwhile gamble. It's a high reward, very low risk here, and we'll see what he's able to do. It's going to be interesting.
The Packers showed some interest in Harrison back in early October. However, he opted to go to the Seahawks. Now he's finally a Green Bay Packer. Let's take a look at today's practice, talk about who participated and who didn't. Good news for the Packers. Running back Jamaal Williams returned to practice today after dealing last week with a quad injury he sustained against the Carolina Panthers. Williams is coming back into a crowded rotation now that running back A.J. Dillon had his welcome to the NFL game this past Sunday when he had 21 carries, 124 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. How is head coach Matt LaFleur going to balance having all 3 of his running backs healthy and in the rotation?
I don't know, because they can't duplicate the football. You only got 1. You got 3 running backs. You want to give the football to all 3 of them. That's tough math. And really, when you look at the offense as a whole, Olivia, everywhere you look, they've got more offensive linemen than they know what to do with. I mean, it doesn't matter who they put out there, whether it's Lucas Patrick, whether it's Rick Wagner, who did not practice today, who was present with that knee injury, John Runyon. No matter who they threw out there, they've been good. They got multiple best 5s. Running back, they've got more than 1. They got more than 2. Matt LaFleur believes they've got 3 legitimate starting running backs, and working them in is going to be challenging, and even the skilled positions. I mean, they got a lot more depth at receiver than they had last year. You look at this past game, Devante Adams goes off, but who didn't make plays? Robert Tonyan, a 10-touchdown tight end. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's got 600 yards. He's been a really good player for them. Al Lazard. A lot of those guys are quiet. They've got more good players and they know what to do with. It's a good problem to have, and I think running back really is on the forefront of that. I don't know how they work in Jamaal Williams and don't put A.J. Dillon to the back burner and still have Aaron Jones be Aaron Jones. But again, it's a good problem to have because it means they've got players.
Tackle Rick Wagner returned to practice. However, he did not actually practice. He was physically present with his helmet, was just off to the side observing. Wagner exited Sunday's game dealing with a knee injury, and he did not return. I believe he left back in the 3rd quarter, and they had to shift things around along the offensive line. Lucas Patrick had to come in and play at right guard with Billy Turner shifting back out to right tackle. The offensive line as a whole only gave up 1 sack early in the game, and after Wagner came out, they still held pretty strong. Going up against one of the league's strongest pass rushes in the Chicago Bears, how can this offensive line gel together even if Wagner isn't healthy enough to go?
Well, the offensive line was great against the Bears when they played a month ago. They were great. And now the caveat is this: there was no Akeem Hicks, and so now there's going to be Akeem Hicks, and they've got to block Akeem Hicks, and he's one of the best interior linemen in the league. So it's going to be a very different look that they get from this Bears defensive front on Sunday. And it's almost every single time that they've been asked or challenged that they've stood up to it. They struggled against Tampa Bay. They struggled against Indianapolis. But as a whole, and they only struggled against Indianapolis in the first half. Second half they struggled, but first half they scored 28 points. As a whole, this offensive line has been money the entire year. So, yeah, it's going to be a good test for them going against a full, healthy Bears defensive front that has Akeem Hicks going into the playoffs. But it's really good offensive line.
Let's look ahead to this weekend's game in Chicago. This game has monumental implications for both the Packers and the Chicago Bears. For the Packers, it's an opportunity to secure the top seed in the NFC and therefore secure a first-round bye and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. For the Bears, they are looking to just get into the playoffs, period. This Chicago Bears team is vastly different than the one that the Packers saw back in Week 12. They're on a three-game winning streak, plus they've been averaging 35 points per game over the last 4 games. What has changed so much specifically about the Bears offense since the Packers last saw them?
Who they played? They played the Lions, the Texans, the Vikings, and I space on who the fourth team, but they
Jaguars.
Well, there you go. That's why I forgot. It was the Jaguars who are, the Jaguars. The Jaguars. That's why. Look, not that the Packers defense is great or world beaters or anything, but they did just hold the Tennessee Titans to 14 points, and they're playing their best football in the past month. The point is this: the Bears have seen nothing like what they're about to see against Green Bay, offensively or defensively, in the past month. The Packers waxed them a month ago. Mitch Trubisky against lesser competition has played semi-competently, which is more than what you can say about Mitch Trubisky for most of his career. So give him some credit for that. If he does it against the Packers, that's a different thing. So we'll just have to see.
We shall see. All right, everybody, let's go over to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube for some of your questions tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. It's good to see everybody. We've already we've answered. Snacks will not be active this weekend. Let's address this quickly. Cheesehead over on Periscope points out that Snacks had some cryptic tweets over the last couple of days following his release. He had mentioned that he didn't want to go through the waiver process, that he wanted to be able to control his own fate, whatever his future would hold next season. He wanted to be able to do it on his terms and not be obligated to go to a team that chose him or somehow was able to get him through the waiver process. However, he has ended up in Green Bay, and we're fairly confident that he will come to Green Bay and report to the Packers, because he has since released yet another tweet referring to a commenter over on Twitter that was discussing sort of the fact that Snacks had shown some option or some preference to come to Green Bay before he visited Seattle, and Snacks essentially agreed with him that the Packers were on a short list of teams that he was willing to come to. How confident should the Packers be that Snacks is going to report to them in the next several days?
Yeah, so Snacks indicated that while his strong preference, as you said, was to not be claimed, there was a short list of teams that he would be open to playing for if he was claimed. And it's highly likely that Brian Gutekunst knew exactly where his team stood on that list. And so the fact that they did claim him, plus it's common sense. This is a team that's likely the one seed if they beat the Bears. Regardless, they're going to have their sights set on the Super Bowl. The way this offense is playing, you got to feel good about their chances of making a long, deep run in the playoffs. And then you look at, if you're Snacks, you look at what this roster is, you look at where you can add to it, and that interior run defensive line help. That's what this roster needs. And for them to be able to go in and be able to contribute to a Super Bowl run potentially like that, it's just common sense. I think it's certainly a place where a veteran, a 32-year-old in his ninth season would be enticed to come play. So, no, he did indicate that I think he said bingo as far as having that short list. And you got to believe that Brian Gutekunst knew exactly where his team stood on that list.
Thank you, Cheesehead, for your question. Let's go over to Tom on Facebook. Tom asks, what do you think Snacks will bring? Sounds like he got a bit bored playing at Seattle and gave off retirement vibes. So Snacks was only active for 6 games, and he himself requested that he be released after he learned that he was going to be inactive against the Los Angeles Rams last week. How likely is it that Harrison will want to stick around with the Packers if they don't make him active for a game in the playoffs?
Well, there's only a couple more games left, so there's no question that he wants to be not a healthy scratch, which is what he was last week in Seattle. But that's where you talk about a very low risk and a potentially decent sized reward. No sweat if things don't work out at this point, but if he can help, you bring him in and give him that shot. So as far as what happened in Seattle, the reality is that this is a 32-year-old Snacks Harrison. It's not a 28-year-old Snacks Harrison. Those are two different guys. So he's not coming in. He's not changing the way that offensive lines attack this Packers defensive front. He's not going to be a game changer, but if he can make him just a little bit better, it's a move worth making.
Thanks, Tom, so much for your question. Let's go over to Jim on Facebook. Jim asks, which wide receiver besides Devante Adams will shine in the playoffs? Let's lump in not just wide receivers, but also tight ends, running backs. Devante Adams has taken a big load over especially this past week against the excuse me, I'm still trying to get over my I'm coughing and trying to against the Titans.
Yeah, I would be down for the count right now. I don't know how you.
Sorry.
Live video, man. This is your thing. You're a gamer.
I know. I'm trying. We're good. We're all good. Devante Adams had a big game this past week against the Titans. 11 receptions, 142 yards, and a few touchdowns as well. When you look at him compared to the rest of the production from this offense, he's obviously taking some targets away from some other receivers like Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Equinemius St. Brown. You mentioned tight end Robert Tonyan. How can they get more involved going forward into the playoffs while still featuring Devante Adams?
Well, the reality is they don't need to. I mean, if Devante Adams goes for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns, there's your passing game, right? You don't need a whole lot else. They scored 40 points doing that. It's like Matt LaFleur said at the beginning of the week. This passing game is going to be run through Devante Adams. And then it's up to the other guys. It's up to Robert Tonyan, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Allen Lazard, maybe at some point Tavon Austin. It's up to those guys to be able to contribute where the blanks are, where the space is to contribute. But Devante Adams is the supernova in this offense, and you feed that beast as much as you can. And I asked Aaron Rodgers today what has led to, because it's not like it's new. It's not like Devante Adams just arrived. He's been a Pro Bowler. He's had 1,000-yard seasons. He's very well aware of 2 997-yard seasons. But it's hit another level this season. So where'd that come from? And Aaron Rodgers said the more you give him, the more he gives. I mean, that's what it is. The more and more targets he's going to get, the more and more production you're going to get. That's just who he is. So I don't think the Packers are scheming their game plans wondering, how do we get Robert Tonyan involved or Allen Lazard? No, it's Devante Adams 1, 2, and 3, and then your fourth option kind of fills in from there. And the reality is they've got some very, very attractive fourth options: a double-digit touchdown tight end, maybe the best deep threat in the game right now with MVS, averaging almost 20 yards per catch. They've got some players to fill in, but they are filling in. It's Devante Adams first and foremost.
Thanks, Jim, so much for your question. Let's go over to David on Facebook. David asks, why not use Jamaal Williams or A.J. Dillon in the backfield, maybe a 2-back set, and try to get Jones matched up on a linebacker? We saw some 2-back sets from the Packers against the Titans, but it wasn't so much 2 running backs. We saw a little bit more running back, fullback. They were using Dominique Dafney quite a bit in the offense this past week. I think he had 26 snaps or so, which is certainly a high for him since he joined the Packers several weeks ago. How likely is it that the Packers would start to incorporate more two-back sets going forward into the playoffs?
I like the way you think, David. I think Matt LaFleur might like that as well. Look, we've already seen them do quite a bit of 21 personnel when they put two backs out there. And I think that it wouldn't be a surprise at all if you see them do even more, move Aaron Jones across the formation all around, because he's a phenomenal receiver for a running back. And then you've got Williams or Dillon. To me, it boils down to this. If you want your best 11 on the field, your best 11 a lot of the times is going to include two running backs in this offense because they're that deep in the backfield. And so that's why you do that. That's why you get creative and you become flexible and try to be versatile, because it's getting your best 11 on the field. And I think that you can certainly see that in the playoffs.
Thank you, David, for your question. Let's go over to YouTube. William wants to know, how will adding Snacks Harrison affect how teams play defensive lineman Kenny Clark? Clark has said all season he has been facing double teams out the wazoo. How will adding someone like Snacks Harrison impact the number of double teams, or just how Kenny Clark is able to play on the defensive front?
Very little, if at all, because he's not a game changer. He's not a guy that comes in and all of a sudden offensive line has to block this Packers defensive front differently. He's a guy that comes in and gives them good snaps, gives them some interior run defense presence. And Snacks was never a big sack guy. You look throughout his career, even when he was an All-Pro, I think he had 2.5 sacks. That's not what you're getting from him. You're hoping to get a handful, 10 to 15 snaps in the run game that can really shore up on early downs that defense. And so I don't think it's all of a sudden Kenny Clark's got a lot more opportunities. I don't think much changes for Kenny Clark.
Thanks so much for your question, William. Let's go over to Todd over on Facebook. Todd says that the Packers' young players are stepping up. Rashawn Gary, safety Darnell Savage, running back A.J. Dillon, and inside linebackers Kamal Martin and Chris Barnes. Martin and Barnes have been finding the field a lot more. Mike Pettin likes to use them in base defense and nickel defense and have them try to stop the run. He likes how fast they are. Outside linebacker Rashawn Gary is having a lot more success going up against offensive linemen and getting to the quarterback. Darnell Savage Jr. has 4 interceptions in just the last few games. How much has some of these younger players, especially some of these players in their second year in defensive coordinator Mike Pettin's scheme, how much have they stepped up in these last several weeks?
Those early draft classes from Brian Gutekunst are looking better by the week, aren't they? I mean, look, he's already got a Pro Bowler in each of his first 2 classes. His very first pick, Jair Alexander, Pro Bowler. His second-round pick last year, Elton Jenkins, Pro Bowler. And then his first 2-round picks, Rashawn Gary and Darnell Savage Jr. from 2019 are really coming on. And I think for both of them, not getting really any offseason, it's got to hurt for a second-year player. That first full offseason is everything for development for a young player. Because that first offseason before your rookie season, it's all about testing. It's all about combine numbers. It's very little about football. And so that first full offseason is about football and really growing in a system. They didn't get that. And so they had to kind of do that in the first half of the season. But they're coming on now, and you're seeing that. A.J. Dillon, we've said all season, he's not playing. The reason he's not playing is not because he isn't good. It's because they've got Aaron Jones and Jamaal Williams, and just wait until it's his turn. And it was his turn Sunday night, and you saw it. Kamal Martin and Chris Barnes, the future of the inside linebacker position. Some guys that are not just big but athletic, some athleticism they haven't had in that second level for a long time. You look at what Ted Thompson did when he first came in as GM in the middle of last decade, 05 and 06, and the draft classes he was able to produce. We have no idea where these will stack up to those, but those were the foundation for what became that Super Bowl in 2010. And these draft classes are looking, again, Pro Bowl in each of the first 2 years, looking very, very good right now.
Thanks so much, Todd, for your question. Let's take a question here from Antwine over on Facebook. Antwine wants to know, will quarterback Aaron Rodgers and the rest of the starters play the whole game on Sunday? The Packers need to play their starters for sure at the start of the game because they're playing for something big, that top seed in the NFC to secure a first-round bye and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. However, if the Packers are able to get off to a sizable lead in the first half of the game, how realistic is it that Matt LaFleur would want to put in some of his backup players in just to have them A, get experience, and B, rest the starters.
They will treat this game exactly like any other game of importance because this is a game of extreme importance. So if they are up 4 touchdowns midway through the fourth quarter, then sure, you can see that. But short of that, if there is any doubt in this game, they're keeping the guys on the field.
Thanks so much, Antwine, for your question. And thank all of you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. We will be back throughout the week to preview this upcoming weekend's game against the Chicago Bears. So if we did not get to your question today, don't worry about it. We'll talk to you guys very soon. For Ryan Wood, I'm Olivia Reiner. We'll see you next time.